Hello everyone, we're going to talk today about taming the data mess, and just before I started this talk I realized that I was not even sure if I could say data or data in English. That's a really interesting question, even the mess starts from there. And in this talk we're going to talk about how not to be overwhelmed by the data landscape. And as you know, there are many systems and we have to choose from them, so it's kind of difficult. My name is Ismaël Mejía. I'm a Microsoft advocate for Azure. And let's start. First, let's do a little warning, because this is a quite opinionated talk. This does not represent the point of view of my employer. It's mostly me and what I have learned from my experience. I say this because sometimes people think that since you work at Microsoft, this is probably the company point of view, but no. So all this, I get interested in this subject because I had a new job opportunity, and this can be the case for many of you for a different things. This can be, for example, for a new project that starts, for a new perspective of creating or integrating a new system. And in my case, in my background, I have been doing open source for many years. I have worked with the Apache Software Foundation, and I work with Hadoop and Spark first as a client, creating jobs and data transformation pipelines. And then I moved more into deep into open source, working in Apache Beam and doing many other things. In both cases, I was working with AWS as infrastructure, and then afterwards with Google Cloud. So when I get a new opportunity to work at Microsoft, it was really interesting because I was not so knowledgeable, let's say, about the technology. And I was presented with Azure, and I was like, oh, this is really nice. This is the cloud infrastructure, let's say, from Microsoft. So they welcome me with this little diagram of the fundamental services that we have in Azure, and of course I quickly found some similarities, like the data services, like the databases like Cosmos DB or Synapse that integrates Apache Spark, so it was kind of an easy place to feel well. But then I realized the platform was quite big, and as you can see, you can easily become overwhelmed with the big size of the things. And then I started to discuss with people, and they asked me questions about security or about networking issues that they had while integrating with data systems. And it's kind of a feeling of being overwhelmed because I had to ramp up in so many technologies and understand everything to explain it. And I had this kind of feeling that I have already lived this. This was not the first time I have to deal with this kind of system, that of experience. Like I have already in the past been confronted to other systems like that. Like when you saw in the old times, the Hadoop ecosystem tools was a little bit like that. But then the real point that triggered my attention some years ago was this image. This image is the data landscape produced by Matt Turk. And this image is quite overwhelming because you see many of the different systems and frameworks and databases and companies that produce all of this. And it gives a broad view of all the things, all the things that we can integrate in our architectures. And even when we zoom in just in a little part of this diagram, we can see that there are many things that we will have to choose from to create our architectures or some solutions. So it's the moment of despair when we get to the real question is how we can choose the right project or the right service or the right product or the right platform with so many options. And this happens to everyone. And of course, there is this big element that they call fear of missing out. That is this feeling that if I'm not in the latest thing or the latest family of systems, I probably am missing something that can, help me have an advantage in my company. So with those two in mind, even with all of this, nobody can learn. I mean, I'm not even can evaluate all of this. There are so many solutions that you can sit all day and don't produce any work just by trying to decide from so many options. So, and what this happens? This happens because there is a lack of consolidation, and we can arguably hope and be optimistic about this, like in the future systems will consolidate. So why should I care about this? But there are many reasons why this has not happened. One is business-wise, of course, and there's many people and companies who are putting money outside, like venture capitalists who give money just to create the next new big data thing, because there is a lot of money in data. Of course, there is this legislation part also. There is nothing that oblige any of these companies to interact between all of them. And of course, there is in a more optimistic way, there is also the technology aspect of it. We are creating new systems that were not possible 15 or 20 years ago. So all of this opens new opportunities, and well, there is innovation. So we have to live with this. This is the message. We have to deal with all this variety. So in the end, if we want to tackle this, we come to the critical problem of decision making. I am not an MBA, so I'm not like an expert on decision making, or a person who is certified on ITL or not this kind of problems. But I got interested into all of this from the perspective of a data engineer and a data architect, and to understand how we can do choices, we probably first need to understand what is the current data landscape in general terms. And in the batch kind of family of systems, let's say, we have two big subfamilies. We have operational data, and operational data corresponds to all the databases that we know, like the Postgres and the SQL servers and oracles from the old time. And all of this is quite mature now. We have many of those who have cloud versions, so let's say this is the more developed area. Then we have the analytical data part, which is what we use to produce reports and do data analysis, and even more recently to start with all these ML trends. And in this we have like two subfamilies that were appeared because of the cloud. Well, we have the data lake part. Is basically we reuse the data storage part of the cloud vendors, and we put or use a distributed file system, because this can be done in premise too. And we put files there, and we create like an open system that we can access. And of course, there's data warehouses that come from a long time ago, but now there are the cloud versions of those. And these are more closed kind of systems, and that give you a more consolidated experience, mostly around SQL, to do all this kind of operations. So this is one part. Then we have the recent, let's say, appeal of streaming data. And the idea of streaming data is that we are going to deal with data at the time it happens. So we want to reduce latency and produce results and integrate results as fast as possible. I would arguably joke about this, saying that streaming data is like the year of Linux desktop of the data engineering world. Why is this? Because in the Linux desktop community, there is always people say, oh, the next year is going to be the year of world domination for Linux, but this never happens. In the data engineering world, it's something like this. Like every year we say, oh, streaming is going to be mainstream now. Everybody's going to use streaming data. And well, we are getting there. We are getting there slowly, but we are not fully there. Of course, there has been a lot of progress because most companies now have a replicated log like Kafka. There is all this event streaming and change data capture things going on. And more recently, there's this trend around SQL over streams, and to have like real-time materialized views of what's going on. So that's another big set of products and tools that we can integrate in our systems. More recently, you probably have heard about data mesh. I won't go any deep into this, but data mesh is a set of concepts that came from a problem that appeared because of data lakes and really integrated data ownership. Probably because it's not because of data, it's because infrastructure became complex and everybody and really specialized people took control of data. And what data mesh proposes is just to have a more decentralized view of data, and this is not 100% about tools, but tools help you to get there. So we can bring data back to the people who have the domain knowledge. It's a question of access and ownership, as I say in this slide. Of course, now also, well, with the big different scenarios for data that we can have, like a batch and maybe using notebooks or maybe using SQL and maybe also some parts with the streaming. And this has gave rise to what we call the cloud data platforms. So these are fully integrated vendors. Some of them are cloud vendors. The things like Snowflake or Databricks and even Azure Synapse, who are going to propose a fully integrated solution for data. So that's another thing. And the opposite of this is the so-called modern data stack movement. These are tools that mostly are service-oriented, like they are cloud first, so there's low configuration, they're easy to set up, and their goals are more focused into specific problems. But the good part of this is that I would call this the second generation tool somehow, because they are in the previous 10 or 15 years, we have been really dealing with the problem of scale with data, how we scale data and get it faster, how we scale data for cheap. But all of this for price. But all of this is really important. But the main, or not say the main, but a really big part of the problems that data engineers have are around different things like governance. How do I govern these data accesses? How can I trace those? How can I do the data lineage? How can I create better catalogs? All of these are, let's say, things that were not immediately solved, but now there are many companies and services that are trying to solve those. So again, another set of things that we can integrate. And of course, we have the ML and AI systems. I don't even want to go a little bit deep this because it's again a lot of things to discuss. But the recent trend is that we want to data supports ML. This is basically one big thing. And the other thing is that we also can use ML to improve our data system. So it's in both directions. So again, many things we can choose from. But when we are going to choose, we need some approach to choose. So that's the real question, how we can choose. Well, with so many tools, with so many trends, what is the right approach? And I came with a sort of a small framework of 3 things that we can take into account to choose. The first one is the strategy, because, well, the strategy of the company is, or the project we are working on is the main area we should focus. Then we have the technology, of course, and because technology constrains the direction of our choices. And then we have the people, because people matters, and it's something that we always let sometimes engineers let for a second thought. So if we go with our first one, with the strategy, well, the first step we have to check is what are our current systems, no? What is the legacy we have as a company? Also, what are our business priorities? Why are we doing this? What results we want to have first? Maybe there's this kind of report that we want to have first, and with different, let's say, requirements. Of course, none of this can be done without paying for this or in one way or another. So we have to take into account costs, how much we pay for licenses, but how much also we pay for engineers and how much we pay for operations, all of these things. We have to also take really into account support, and that's something that we tend to forget. When I say support, this is how fast your vendor is going to answer your questions and help you get there. This is something that Microsoft does well in Azure. Of course, another important dimension is knowledge and experience. So if you have a team, does this team have knowledge on this particular tool we want to use? That's something that's interesting. For example, when you are recruiting, if you're going to recruit someone but knows this next thing we want to integrate, that's pretty good. And of course, all these decisions have an impact in the future of what we do. We have to take into account this. Is choosing this tool maybe solving the problem right now, but bringing me more issues in the future? That's another thing we have to analyze. And one common thing that happens is that people get pressed a little bit because of marketing, because of buzz of their peers about what is the next nice thing everybody's using. And sometimes this is not appropriate for the kind of problems you have. And this is something I happened to me with a friend not a long time ago, who asked me, oh, you see, there's these companies, now we're hearing a lot about this thing called feature stores, and we want to do machine learning in our company. This is a little startup. So maybe I need a feature store to this. And well, this is that's not the right way to approach this problem. The first question I asked, well, do you already have data available? And well, is this data clean and of good quality? Do you have processes to keep it like that? Because it's not only one time shot, you have to keep these things going on. And more important, is the data already used in your business? Do you have reports and things like that? This is all the steps that were pretty important even before thinking about machine learning or stuff like that. And even if we go into some kind of machine learning specific project, like, I don't know, text recognition, for example, do you have to do this by yourself, or can you use a managed service to do that? And that's another thing you have to consider. So in general, well, marketing and new projects and ideas are really good and exciting, but well, you have to take things with a grain of salt. Another thing that is common is that we have cognitive biases, and cognitive biases happen when we saw a first image of something and we get a little bit assuming that, oh, that's the way it is. One common approach on this for data systems is performance. No, everybody talks about, oh, my system is the most performant, the fastest than all the others, or beat this benchmark. But well, performance is just only one dimension of so many things you have to take into account when you choose a data system. This photo, for example, this is a photo of the countryside in Scotland, which is really beautiful. But as you can see, this is a kind of a pretty day with sun and not so many clouds, but in general, this can be quite a different experience if you go in during the winter and it's quite rainy. So just to say, well, don't let yourself be anchored by the things that they show you first. Other thing that matters is when we do these decisions and this timeliness, for example, that we use to decide if we go with some new, more experimental technology or we wait until we jump into something matters. And that's something that we as engineers have to play, or decision makers, we have to play a little bit of distance before taking this decision. We cannot do it immediately, just to think a little bit more. And of course, even with all of this into account, well, we end up having to deal with things that are not set in stone, let's say, that we have to have faith on many things. Like, for example, is your tech provider going to be there in 3 or 4 years, or maybe it's going to change price or strategy, and how this will impact you? And we can say, oh, okay, but this is for vendors and all this stuff. But what about open source? And this will be a guarantee for the future, and it can be, but well, you don't know if your open source project will be maintained in the future. And this is something that happened not recently ago with workflow system for data, that a big company open source, and now they say they're not going to maintain it anymore. And if your company is dependent on this system, well, you have to be ready. So again, all of this is to say that part of the strategy is to be ready for changes. And this is what we have to do. Now, what about the technology? The technology part is something that we always are quite strong about. Like we always say, like, oh, our systems are bad, and there's this sort of negativity about the current solutions. But we have to be realistic. We have to deal with what we have, and every company has a mess somewhere. So if you are ashamed of your architecture or these things that are done wrong, well, this is what it is. You have to deal with it, and we can incrementally fix things. So this is something that we have to consider first. And well, part of choosing new technologies or dealing with all these products in the landscape, it's exciting and get us the possibility to experiment with new things, but sometimes we have to play a little bit conservative, no, and choose the technologies that are in the proven path for these critical operations, because well, nobody wants to be called in the night because something's not working because of some experiment. We are open to experimentation in many areas, but we also have to be conservative. And this is a common tension and trade-off between when choosing systems. Of course, cloud services are a fantastic thing because they let us experiment with an easy setup, let's say. And well, sometimes with a really affordable cost at least for the exploration part, no? When you are doing a proof of concept, and doing proof of concepts also is something that helps your engineers to be interested. So something that we should consider. Another thing, technology that we can arguably say is good is to choose open source tools, no? Because open source tools give you the control of the tool. You can adapt the tool for your needs. So that's attractive. Of course, open source has to be looked in detail in one sense, because there are always incentives, in the tools that are open source. So one thing you have to check first is who open sourced this tool and why. But more important than that is to check if there is a healthy community around the project that we are going to choose. And of course, the question of licenses. But more important is to also see if there are multiple actors. There are people who are interested in this tool, or is going probably to disappear tomorrow if someone does not maintain it anymore. And if you choose an open source tools and you say, okay, but we can take care of it, well, look that you have the resources to take care of it. This is something that matters. And of course, a part of open source, recently we also have open data formats and table formats that are like ways we represent the data, we store the data into our data lakes. And since you control the data, well, you control the format and you control how you modify the data or how can you access the data. So the good thing here is to choose formats that have a healthy ecosystem. There is a new family of table format tools like Apache Iceberg or Delta, who allow to do new nice things. So if you control data, take care that the data is in an open format that you can access in the future, because you need to have the guarantee in time. And of course, a good table format also allows you to control schema evolution, allows you to do time travel in between different versions of the data, which is really nice and recent, let's say, future of these kind of systems. Of course, when you choose a tool, probably you also need to decide how you integrate with other tools that you already have or systems, and then we have to check about the compatibility. We have API compatibility, which is really important, and it's something that is happening more and more. Like in the case of data, sometimes there are the concrete APIs, like the MongoDB API that is supported by Cosmos DB, for example. Or sometimes there are like SQL flavors, like is the SQL flavor supported? That can be another way to check at this. And more recently, there are tools who are supporting data at the level of the wired compatibility. So, for example, they support, let's say they support Postgres compatibility. So the nice thing of this is once you support the DB protocol, the tools that integrate with this kind of database will integrate with your tool too. For example, if this new database like CockroachDB, for example, supports Postgres, the Postgres mode of connection, well, you can just, in theory at least, replace them easily. And of course, it's as I said, all these tools, all the existing tools that you have are supported. All your Power BIs and Tableaus and all these kind of things are already something that you can integrate with the new system. That's another question you have to ask when you choose technology. Another thing we have to choose when we choose technology is to choose how we're going to operate it. And this is something interesting because I wasn't just searching for an image for this slide. And I realized with the with the proposed images that operations are something that have three traits. One is that operations are critical, operations are hard, and are done mostly by experts. And as you can see in these different domains, from the control center to the surgery to the military operations, these are things that have these patterns. And well, let's not forget that we also have to do this for software. Like that, operations and software are critical. So if you can go cloud and deal less with this, probably it's a good idea. If you can't, well, you have to be prepared to deal with the complicated part. And of course, when we choose technology, we have the issue of risk planning. So will I be locked with this vendor, and why, and especially what is the trade-off? Because being locked with a vendor can have some advantages, but also can have some hidden costs. One common in the cloud, for example, is the cost of data egress. Is the data egress something we care about? In the long term, if we are going to get all this data out, it's going to be really expensive. So we have to think in advance what we're going to happen in 2 or 3 years. And of course, another part of that we usually don't consider a risk, but is important, is the user experience of these different tools. Do our developers like them? And why I say this is critical? Because if people don't like these things, they don't use them. So if they don't use them, we are losing the advantages. And of course, part of this experience also is about documentation. Is documentation good and sufficient? And of course, the different support channels. It's easy to find a community, find answer to my questions. All of this is part of the technology choice. And of course, we can use one advantage that we also sometimes forget is communication. Is that before choosing this kind of tool, you can discuss with your network, with your peers, and ask them, wow, you use this tool, what do you think about this tool? And commonly people are really enthusiastic and tell you what's going on, what's good and what is bad. What is bad is really important also to take your decisions. You can of course talk with the providers who will give you an overview of things. You can engage with the community, as this is especially important for open source tools. When you decide to use an open source tool, well, you can check the community, check the GitHub, see how many people are active in the project. You can estimate also, you can ask a question and see how easily they answer to, or they go into their Slack, and of course read technical information about all these things. So the last aspect is the people dimension. And the people dimension has something that is important, is that people happiness matters, and here is funny because I do mostly technical presentation and this sounds not so technical, but this is important. We need to balance stability and innovation. Sometimes people are happy because they are going to do something new and it's pretty cool and it's different, but sometimes people are happy because they can't sleep at night. They are not bothered because of production issues. So we have to make happy both camps. And one thing is important for people is the expertise. What are the things that engineers know and how they can do things with their tools. And sometimes when someone knows a tool pretty well, maybe it's not the right tool to do the job, but sometimes it's the right tool for the person. So it's use your right tools. Of course, when you're working, for example, repair your home or do something like that, and you don't have enough tools to do the action, well, you learn and you can decide how critical some tool could be for you. So this can be something we can use to decide what is the more critical thing we need when we choose all of these tools in the landscape. But not amount of data and ML technology will solve issues for any project without domain knowledge. So we have to know what we are talking about, and this domain specialist knowledge is something that really, really matters. And we used to say that data is the new gold. And this is a very nice expression. So I decided, I'm going to search for this in the internet. So I put this, data is the new phrase. And then Bing gave me as a result, data is the new bacon. And I was like, oh, wow, wait, maybe this is because of Bing. And then I decided to Google it, and well, data is the new bacon was also there. So this is an expression that I invented for some conference years ago. But what matters with this data is the new bacon expression is that some data should be something we like, something we care about, no? It's the new oil, it's the new gold, call it as you want. But more critical than this is that data must be part of our culture. And this is the most important, probably, slide of this presentation for me. Data, it must be part of our culture, and this is not only for companies and software projects. This is for all of our culture. Like you have seen all the things that have happened in the recent years with politics and all this stuff and fake news and all this. If we have an education about data, well, we can be aware of so many things. So this matters. So data matters for everything. And sometimes it's not only about technology, and I want to tell this little story about a recent project I was part of. In Microsoft, there is this team that is called Microsoft Docs, and Microsoft Docs is all the people who produce the websites with the documentation and the examples and the learn modules, and this is huge. This is, if you think about the whole complete Microsoft, this is huge. And they did this hackathon project when we had to propose they wanted to integrate all this kind of the data that users produce from all these systems. Let's say this is like an analytics kind of project when each time you click in a link, or you do a module, or you do a learn, or you read documentation, well, all of this is tracked and stored in some data store. And they wanted to call different stakeholders to be interested on data, to be part of this. And well, there are many people who are interested into this. Like I was interested because I wanted to know what are the trends, what people are looking for on particular products. So there are also product managers who are interested into this, advocates, and the people who are producing the content too. So I participated in this hackathon, and the idea was to consolidate also the queries we had. And what is interesting is that this hackathon first made us, especially the ones who were not aware of, I was not aware of the data catalog we had internally for this. And then we could contribute to this with our own queries, like for analytics, and we have this consolidated shared library of queries that was produced because of this. And of course, because some of us were new and we were dealing with how to get into this, well, this also produced an onboarding guide for all of this data analytics. And a part of this, well, there was discussion about the future strategy. How can we integrate all this? How can we produce more data queries that are part of this? And what are we using the right technology? And that was the critical point. Is this the right kind of language we have to use for this? And as you can see, all we did here did not require any tool. Well, of course, they require some tools that were already in place, but we didn't have to buy a new solution for this. But the return for the company is interesting because a lot of us who were not aware of data became aware of the data for some of the part of the task we have to do now. So this is an interesting project. And this reminds me that there is this kind of company mandated compliance trainings. You probably have seen those. And does your company have those for data processes? We talk about data is the most important thing. Data is the new gold or the new bacon. But we probably we are not giving the data the importance it should have in your company. So are you learning already about the data use in your company? That's something that probably everyone cares about. I mean, even as a software engineer, a normal software engineer, you want to know how your company is going, or are we really growing, or this kind of data that we can have access to. Well, it's important to know. And as we said, well, used to say data is the new gold, but well, if there's the new gold, we probably need more miners. So this is data matters. Another approach we can have to get this kind of culture of data is to have some sort of role rotation. And I was thinking about this, like if so many times there is the tension between data analysts who are producing the reports or analyzing the current data, and data engineers who are in many cases dealing with infrastructure. Sometimes the other parts of the organization don't know the struggle they have. So for example, if you are doing just front end or back end engineering, maybe an interesting approach would be to have a rotation program like DevOps people have. You can just put someone who does not normally do this kind of data analytics or engineering job and put it there just to see how it works. And definitely this will create empathy about the different issues that one or the other have. So this is another good idea. Well, with this, I'm going to finish this presentation. I just want to do a short recap. First, well, as you saw, there are many things who are not white or black. There are always not in the extremes. There are always trade-offs, and we have to choose our trade-offs wisely. Of course, probably the most easy way to approach things is to do it step by step. Don't jump into the next product that is going to solve everything for you, because you can hit the wall with this. This probably the best approach is to doing a step by step adoption, seeing what we are needing or what we care about, and take a little bit of it step by step. Don't focus on magical solutions, because magical solutions basically don't exist, and especially this, if it works on X at X company, especially it's because big companies don't have the same problems. The dimension is different, and what they are doing is different. So focus on your in your own. And of course, focus on the three main issues, the main aspects, let's say, to take the decision. There are strategy, technology, and people. And if you have doubts, people and knowledge are always more important than technology. You can find your way with technology easily than with people. So this is all of my presentation. I just wanted to say that I was thinking a lot about data engineering while doing this presentation, and data engineering is still exciting. There's a lot of things that feel like we have not completed. So and the way this integrated in companies, the approach is changing, and there is a lot of opportunity. So I wanted to let you with this message that there is a lot of things to do. So thanks for joining me.
Ismaël, thank you so much for joining us and sharing how to tame the data mesh, what are the strategies we should think about, what are the technical aspects, the people aspects, the knowledge, etc. It was really insightful. This is the time now for questions, so we're opening the floor for anyone who wants to ask questions. You can ask right in the chat that we have there on the right. And I've collected also a couple of questions that already came up. So one of the things, Ismaël, that you mentioned was actually about opportunities in the ecosystem, and also why the data engineering ecosystem is so diverse, because you mentioned that it existed for more than 60 years, which is incredible. So how those opportunities in particular in the data ecosystem so diverse?
Yeah, thanks. Well, something that jumped to my mind, like when I prepared this presentation, was the fact that we don't really reflect much on the past as the years. Like because well, the past, let's say, have simpler systems we think today, because well, we have the old databases that come from the 60s, but well, in reality, in the industry, we're in the 80s somehow. And if you think about it, many things have not changed. We are doing the full circle. Many systems are going back to standard SQL. We are getting into Postgres as a standard binary protocol. Some of these things show that there is something standard that we can find. And this standard is, well, not only in technology, but also in processes. And well, I think there is a huge opportunity there. The world data mesh movement, I think it's a really right step in that direction. Like we are thinking about, okay, what's critical and why? And it's not only technical, of course, there are technical challenges, but we have also evolved a lot in the technical aspect. Let's say we have now cheap data storage, so we can have data lakes. We have immutability first principles, reproducibility with containers. We're almost getting to a point when maybe we can create a data architecture today that can stand on the time, let's say. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, how to do it with so many tools? That's a different question.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You mentioned data mesh, and I remember when it was discussed in QCon, I believe in 2019 in San Francisco, in a small room where Jamek, went on stage and shared her vision for data mesh. I remember it created a lot of question marks with people, because sometimes we tend to focus so much on technology aspects, we forget about people and strategies and etc. and how to scale it beyond just the scalability of technology, which I think is fascinating. What do you think about this aspect of decentralizing the data architecture that data mesh suggests?
That's interesting. I mean, I think decentralization matters. It's a little bit like the microservices subject, no? Somehow like the equivalent in the data world. I think decentralization matters if you want to scale in the sense that, well, responsibilities, no? Like the people who are responsible for these data products are the ones who have the knowledge. So this definitely is a step in the good direction. Of course, this requires that there are systems also that help to that. It's not only the systems, but you need both. You need the technology and you need knowledge from people.
Yeah, yeah, I observed the same things. You also mentioned there was a question about compliance training. Like usually in companies, there are compliance training for different aspects. For example, security, right? How do you stay secure? How do you secure your system and laptops, etc. And you did a shout out to say, hey, how can we actually build a compliance training around data? Can you share a little bit more about the thought process around it?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting idea. I mean, I had already long time ago one compliance training on GDPR stuff, the European law. And well, at that point, what I thought is it's interesting because we are learning about something really generic, but we are not learning about data in our companies, like what is happening, what data we produce. And that's probably one of the reasons why we always end up with the domain expert who only knows the data set and knows what to do, and nobody knows about it because, well, the other people are maybe just plumbing the data back into the place, but not learning about the data. I think this is something that should change with the new kind of more domain-oriented mindset that comes also from data mesh. We should think these kind of things like and when I mentioned this role rotation, I think that's interesting, especially for junior engineers. Like you want to touch many things to see what's your area of let's say that you like the most. Well, one of these things you can do is just go play with this area, learn about it. I think we need diversity of because and that's the problem that is different, for example, from infrastructure. That data is a way bigger range of people, like from really analytics people, more let's say pure business people, to infrastructure. And well, you have to be wider also.
Yes, I feel the same. It's I remember when being data driven just started was a whole conversation on how do you make data driven decisions, right? So where is the data? Can we trust that data? Um, how can we collect the data in a safe manner? You mentioned also GDPR, right? There's a lot of compliances that we need to adhere to as data engineers, as people that work with data. Um, I'm curious, how do you see the trend of doing data-driven decisions in the industry compared to what it was, let's say, before it started? Like, people did data-driven decisions, or it's more, a gut feeling?
I think we all love the idea of having data-driven decisions, but there is still a lot of that gut feeling out there now. But well, the good part somehow is that well, we are maturing into this, and we are realizing as software engineers in general. Sometimes we always have this analogy of, oh, software architectures, like normal architectures, let's say, like architectures that stand on time. But we are not at all like this. We are always evolving, and that's something that is recent. And I mean, it's recent that everybody has the realization. Oh, I didn't do my big application. I never touch it again. No, no, no. The world doesn't work like that. You should continue iterating on this, especially now with the cloud. You are still in a live system, not your machine that you turn off. It's now a live system, and I think slowly we're getting into this with data processes and data knowledge that, well, hopefully so helps us solve this issue.
Yeah, I feel the same. um, Interesting. So you said some of the strategies that you presented around technology as making sure that you manage the trade-offs, that you have a clear understanding of trade-offs. However, one of the challenges is actually that it is a complicated world. So how do you manage this trade-offs in such a complicated world where there are many moving parts, and you have to decide on adopting a new technology or a new paradigm?
It's definitely a question of balance, no? Of risk. And sometimes being an early player is an advantage for you. Sometimes, well, maybe you are paying the price, like people who adopted early Hadoop, for example, is one of the quite good examples. Like it was really interesting as technology, but well, it was too early for many people to adopt, and maybe even Kubernetes is arguably say the same. I think there is not we cannot create a rule in stone. I mean, it's case by case, but well, we also have to be consistent that sometimes things are shiny in the exterior, but well, they are not the thing that you need, or you have to know how to prioritize. So.
Yeah, love it. Well, Ismael, thank you so much for sharing. For everyone watching, if you want to ask Ismaël questions over Zoom, we're wrapping up this presentation, and you're most welcome to join Ismaël in the Hangout session. The only thing you need to do is click on the yellow banner on the schedule page, and it will be an opportunity to go live and ask questions and interact with Ismaël, and we'll be there waiting for you. Also, during the break, make sure to check the sponsor areas where you can opt in to unlock ebooks, white papers, demos, and giveaways. To go back, you can go to the room link in the next session. You can find it in the schedule and just navigate back from the schedule page back to the data track. Thank you so much, Ismaël, for sharing your knowledge and wisdom collected over many, many years. It was a pleasure to listen to your presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.